Not far away, let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love not long ago.
Aloha everyone, this is Larry Camp, and welcome to the Nobody Knows Your Story podcast, which just happens to come with a side of Hawaiiana. Nobody Knows Your Story is a podcast which I believe will impact each listener in a positive way. As you listen to the experiences that have transformed, shaped, and guided each guest, perhaps you'll better understand your own personal journey. Some will surprise, some will make you question, and some will inspire, but all will leave you in a better place for listening in. As for the Hawaiiana, well, that's just a big part of my life story. So I invite you to check in from time to time, or better still, add Nobody Knows Your Story to your list of favorite podcasts. You'll enjoy hearing the life experiences of people just like you.
We like to surf all day, jamming music, kachi, we like to sing and play. It's kind of feel up, music all around me just feel good. Let's kind of feel up, smiles on all the faces like it should. Memories will stay alive as long as you sing and play along. Brother walking, yes, and he didn't have a smile. I told him to turn it upside down and to wait a little while. Gonna feel up, music all around that just feels good. Let's gonna feel up, smiles on all the faces like it should. Memories will stay alive as long as you sing and play along.
Aloha friends, and mahalo for checking in today to hear another interesting and inspirational life story. Now we just heard a fun, upbeat song from Laupepa Latuli called Kanikapila. Now Kanikapila means actually a couple different things in Hawaiian, but most often it refers to kind of an informal get-together, maybe a backyard gathering of friends just playing music. Now, mid-podcast, we're going to hear a new song from Tangi called Road to Hana. My guest today is Steve Gamlin, and his story, though unique to him, will resonate with many. You see, Steve has lived a life, like most, of ups and downs, and had opportunities to create his own path. Now, we're going to hear it all here today on Nobody Knows Your Story. Steve, welcome.
Aloha, Larry. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. Very happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Well, and I already know that you're from New Hampshire, and the farthest west you've been is California. You did get some surfing in. We talked about that a little bit before we started up here today, and I'm not sure if Hawaii's on your bucket list, but you know, for some people it is. Other people are like, just enjoy it from afar, and that's fine. You're a long ways from Hawaii.
Yes, I am. And as long as there's a beach with kiddie waves, I could probably survive surfing in Hawaii just to say I had done it. But put it this way, I'm 6'2". If the waves are bigger than me, I'm going to land on some rocks somewhere and the seagulls will be feasting on me.
You know, you'll hear people say sometimes, oh, that wave was only 6 feet tall or whatever. I'm saying, okay, well, imagine laying down and looking up. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good size wave. And I can tell you this, I've not been great at balance throughout my whole life. My wife would tell you that. We tried stand-up paddle boarding, and I can stand up, but to try to really move and do stuff, I'll fall over. I just don't have, whether it's snow skiing, but surfing early I lived in California growing up, and I tried to surf probably as early as like 11, 12 years old. And I just struggled with the balance part of it. So I gravitated to the old term boogie boarding or bodyboarding. And I found that to be kind of my go-to. And again, I'm going back to the 6-foot wave. If you're laying on a bodyboard, and even though you have your fins on, because you need those because you're in water where you can't touch bottom, you look up and you see that wave coming. I mean, that even a 6-footer is a challenge. And, you just start kicking. But man, if you catch that wave and then you're cutting left, or you're cutting right, it is just such an exhilarating feeling. I can't even explain it to people unless they've done it, because it is just awesome. And so I'm not sure how I got down that path of going into boogie boarding, but you started it with your surfing comment.
Yes, I did. Yeah. It's, and it's like you said, looking up at that wave, life is a lot like that. When you hit it just right, when the moments are just right. And I've had many of those moments over the years. And I've also crashed and burned in between all of these high moments over the years.
And we're going to talk about some of those crash and burns too.
Oh, there have been some good ones. But a phrase I love to say is, that which does not kill me gives me a great story to share on stage. And I do. I get
That's
it.
for sure. Well, hey, let's start with your story. Maybe the beginning days and, growing up. And I know that there are a couple of those crash and burns happened early on in life, and we'll talk about some of those. But yeah, let's just start off. Where were you born?
Yeah, I was born just north of Boston, Mass. I lived in Massachusetts till I was 7, and then we moved to New Hampshire. I've been here ever since. So this year is my 50th anniversary of being a Granite Stater, which they should send me a card or a cake or something. But normal, average childhood, rode my bike, played Little League, had a bunch of friends, did well in school. And when I was 11 years old, I had 4 goals in life. And the first one was I wanted to be a radio DJ, because at the time there was a show on TV called WKRP in Cincinnati with the coolest dude on the planet, Dr. Johnny Fever, was their DJ. And I wanted to be like Dr. Johnny Fever. I also wanted to be a stand-up comedian, because Steve Martin was huge at the time with his Wild and Crazy Guy album. And I thought that was just magic, that you could make people laugh. I wanted to write my own books, because my sister and I had a mom who taught us the value of reading and writing and how joyful it can be to express yourself. And so I wanted to write my own books. And I also wanted to be a teacher of people, but not in a classroom, because I had a 5th grade teacher named Mrs. Farron, who, whenever I finished my work early, she would encourage me to help some of the other students that might be struggling with that lesson. So she actually, at age 11, she had me coaching other people. And I just thought it was the coolest, most joyful thing in the world, to help somebody to understand a lesson and get them to believe in themselves a bit more. And that was at age 11. At age, 24, I had graduated college, barely, with a business degree. What my dad loves to call graduating summa cum this close. I graduated by 62 1,000ths of a point with a degree that I had no plan to even use. So I sat for a couple of years from 22 to 24, just kind of miserable and depressed, living on my grandfather's couch at the time, wondering what the heck to do with my life, because I wasn't feeling it. And one of my dear friends, my friend Danny, asked me one day, why didn't you ever get into radio like you said you wanted to? You always talked about music and being on the radio, and you're so happy when you did it, but you never did anything about it. So out of excuses, I called the local rock radio station. I talked to the midday DJ. Her name is Cindy Brooks, and she and I are still dear friends to this day. I said, Cindy, I'm thinking of getting into radio. What should I do? And she said, well, there's a school down near Boston. It's called Connecticut School of Broadcasting. So I borrowed $4,000 from my grandfather in June of 92. And I went to an 8-week course down in Boston. At the time, my parents had divorced in my early 20s, so my mom lived in Boston. So I crashed with her for a couple months and went to broadcast school. And a month later, I got an internship at a rock station that we had grown up listening to. And I drove to my friend Danny's house. And I hadn't seen him all summer because I was in Boston. And he asked, where you been? I said, radio school. He goes, no. Did you get a job? I said, well, an internship. He goes, oh, cool. Can you get me like T-shirts and bumper stickers and CDs and stuff? I'm like, all right. Yeah, you inspired me to follow my dreams. So now you can pimp me for gifts. Okay. But there was a huge lesson in that, because 3 weeks after that, at age 23, Danny passed away. He had had cancer twice before, and it came back very quickly, and it took him from us. And I was holding his hand when he passed. His family was generous enough to allow me to be in the room because we had been such good friends. And I wound up getting a paid job at that rock radio station for sub-minimum wage. So I started DJing weddings on the weekend. And 10 years later, in my third radio group, I've now worked 15 years worth of hours in a decade. I am burnt into the ground. I was married at the time, heavily in debt and exhausted and falling apart. And I walked away from radio without a full-time job. I just had my weekend DJ business that I was making maybe $11,500 a year. And that was it. I just pulled the ripcord and dove out of the plane. The last big event that was part of the radio years was a concert that my radio group put on in Laconia, New Hampshire, which is the Lakes region of New Hampshire. Absolutely gorgeous. And we had a band there. We had fireworks after. And I remember sitting on the edge of the stage. And I just thought to talk to my friend Danny. I just looked up. I had tears coming down out of my eyes. And I looked up and I said, man, thank you. Because you believed in me when I didn't. And even though I'm falling apart again, it's a hell of a ride. And you helped me to believe that I could do it, and I did it. And shortly after that, I got divorced. And tens of thousands of dollars in debt at age 35. I had to crawl home and live with family. And I decided to put my life back together. Didn't know how, but through a friend of a friend, I connected with a guy who had just gotten his certification as a life coach. And I got to be his first guinea pig. And in August of 2003, on a very hot and humid afternoon here in New Hampshire, I decided to take out my frustrations and self-loathing on a bucket of golf balls at a local driving range that was part of a mini golf course. And I went way to the farthest tee box on the property because I am a horrible golfer and I did not want to dent anyone's car in the parking lot. So I was underneath this row of steel-towered power lines. And all of a sudden, being hot and humid on a Friday afternoon in New Hampshire, a thunderstorm came through. So I've got rain, wind, thunder, lightning. Everybody but me ran from the storm. And there I am, barefoot in the wet grass, under power lines, whacking the crap out of a bucket of golf balls, getting out my self-loathing and self-hatred and frustrations. And at one point, being sarcastic, I was not challenging God, because some people have said, you shouldn't challenge God. I didn't challenge God. I was just being funny. Held the club over my head and slowly spun it around. And I said, go ahead. I dare you. So hit my bucket and the buckets of two guys that ran from the storm and never came back. And when I was done, after about an hour, I could hardly lift my arms anymore. I got to my car and I opened the door. And the rain stopped, and the first couple of cracks of light came through the dark clouds. And I just started laughing. I thought that was funny. Just thinking, all right, God, well played. The next day, I was on a phone call with that brand new life coach, and he asked, how was your week? And I said, well, put down your pen and check this out. Hear what this moron did yesterday. And in about 3 to 5 minutes, I told the story of that hour. It was brutally self-deprecating. But he was doing something on the other end of the phone that you shouldn't do when your client's life sucks. He was laughing out loud at me telling this story. And at the end, he said, I have 2 questions for you. Are you this open and honest about your life with everybody? I said, yeah. And then he asked, have you ever thought of being a motivational speaker or a stand-up comedian? I think you'd be really good at both. Now, he did not know those 4 goals I had when I was a kid, one of which I'd already achieved. Radio DJ. The other one, actually, writing my book. I was working on my first book at the time, a collection of short stories about the weirdest things I've experienced as a wedding DJ. And it was called Table 7, Your Centerpiece is on Fire, which did actually happen. He filled in the other 2 spots. He asked, have you ever thought of doing these 2 things? And I said, yeah, but I have no idea how to pursue each one. On his desk in the junk mail pile, only because he hadn't thrown it out yet, was a brochure for a local community college. And 2 weeks later, they had a class called Intro to Stand-Up Comedy. And he said, I'll send you the information if you want to go. I said, heck yeah, I'll be there. And a week after that, at his suggestion, I went to my first Toastmasters meeting to learn how to craft my stories and polish up my presence and in everything for speaking. I did stand-up comedy for 7 years. I was in Toastmasters for 8 because I loved competing and, I mean, just going anywhere to win or just be part of a competition. I once drove 7.5 hours to speak for 6.5 minutes to come home with a trophy, and that was the trip that I learned you do not joke with the border guards in Canada. They got me good. They searched my car because I was a smart ass and said, when he asked, "Do you plan to bring anything back into America?" I said, "Yes, a trophy." Ha, 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 ha. Sir, pull your car over there. Get my car searched. But I loved what I was doing so much. And I started to learn about visualization. Again, back to that coach who asked me early on, have you ever heard of The Secret, which had just come out on DVD talking about law of attraction and all these things? And I got it. And I was so fascinated by the energy of the world and the universe or God or whatever you choose to call a higher power. And this one guy named John Assaraf talked about this thing called a vision board. He talked about it for maybe 90 seconds out of an hour and a half DVD. And I locked into that so strongly that I said, I'm going to start to visualize and create my best life. And I made a couple of vision boards that were really all about the material thing, what I now refer to as the vision board starter kit, the Lamborghini, the yacht, the private jet, the mansion, the big honking gold watch, the supermodel, and the big pile of cash in your basement. Mm-hmm. And after about 3 weeks, I was not even emotionally connected. I looked at it. Matter of fact, I still have that board. And it still makes me laugh because it's a glorified letter to Santa Claus for stuff. Mm-hmm. So I started to understand that there's a whole bunch of different areas of your life. And there's a pretty standard tool out there called a life wheel. The one I use has 8 spokes on it, and I've tweaked it to the way I teach. And I finally decided I should be setting goals for my physical health, the emotions I want to feel on a regular basis, my closest relationships. And of course, at the time I was single, but I was starting to build that dream loving relationship in my mind. My core values that I absolutely had to live by, my faith, which, I'm not part of an organized religion, but me and God, we're good. My connection to the world in real ways every day, and then my career and my finances. And when I started to set goals for each of these areas, understanding that they're operating 24/7, whether or not you're paying attention to them. So wouldn't it be a good idea to include all those areas of your life? Because they're all leaning on each other. And I thought about it one day. And I said, I want to fall in love one more time in this lifetime. And so I started to include pictures and descriptions and writing about the type of relationship that I wanted to have. And also I had to be the best version of myself. So I spent a couple of years doing this. I wanted to be more open and honest and communicative because whenever I had friction or frustration, I used to shut down and not deal with it. And of course, what happens? You being a visitor to Hawaii, have you ever seen a volcano with an off switch? Probably doesn't happen. And nope. That's what I would do. It would build up frustration and I would just blow up. In any area of my life, I would just blow it up. So I decided I wanted to be more patient and open and communicative and all of that. And for 2 years, I designed that relationship in addition to working on the other areas of my life. And in January of 2007, I made that year's vision board. And I said, this is the year that I'm going to find her, whoever she may be. And in early June, I wrote in my journal, I am ready to fall in love. And on June 16th of 2007, I got an email, which I almost threw out because I thought it was spam, from someone named Tina. And I got distracted because of the thundering herd of squirrels in my head, each playing their own harmonica, saying, hey, listen to this. The next day, I remembered that email, opened it up, and it was a girl I'd gone to high school with that I hadn't seen or spoken to in 21 years. And I read it, and she said, hey, I saw your name online. Oh, my gosh, the kid who used to sit behind me and hide in math class is now a stand-up comedian, was on the radio as a professional speaker. I just had to see if it was really you. And I typed back, yeah, it was. And she typed back, hey, we should stay in touch. And she sent me her phone number. And a couple of days later, I called. The first words out of her mouth in 21 years in her classic sarcastic voice. It's about time you called. And 4 weeks later, just by texting, calling, and emailing, she would not send me a picture of herself, nor did she have a social media footprint. She was off the grid. I remembered that I had a crush on her for 3 years in high school and never had the guts to ask her out. And on July 21st of that year, just over 4 weeks after the email, she sent me a text. Can I tell you something if you promise not to freak out? And I said, sure. And she texted back, here's how I felt about you back in school. Here's how I felt when I saw your name online, when you answered my email, and when I heard your voice, and right now. And she texted 143, which, if you look it up, is text for I love you. 1 letter, 4 letters, 3 letters. And I texted back, I love you too. That was the first time we had said it, and we never stopped saying it. And a month after that, she was flying to New Hampshire because her grandmother was having surgery. So she was in Florida at that time. She flew up, and on August 17th of 2007, 21 years after I'd last seen her, I ran into the airport a couple minutes late. She was already off her plane, and I saw her at the luggage carousel and completely just fell in love with her all over again. And we got to be in love for 6,386 days. Unfortunately, she passed away suddenly in early December of 2024. But every single thing I'd put on my vision board of the type of relationship I wanted to have, a couple holding hands at the railing of a ship at sunset, we did that. Walking hand in hand on a beach, we did that. A couple in their kitchen making dinner together and laughing, we did that. We made dinner together at least 4 nights a week. So all of these things and all of this vision and this entire journey of our story and how we fell in love just expanded everything. And even though the two of us being together every day, you know, that it's shifted to a different plane of existence. She's still around me because I feel her presence. I hear her presence every single morning this week. And I was on a recent podcast and we were talking about how much Tina was a fan of Elton John and George Michael. Every morning this week, as I popped in the shower, I put on Sirius XM on my phone, and it's been either a George Michael song or an Elton John song every morning this week. So she's showing me she's still here.
You know, I didn't want to interrupt because, you know, you had a nice 10-minute, 12-minute roll there of telling your story. But man, I've got about 10 different questions that I thought of while you were speaking there. Yeah. First of all, I just want to tell you, you know, I'm sorry for your loss of Tina. I mean, I've been through a couple losses. It's difficult, and it changes your life. There's kind of the life you had up until that moment, and then the life since. But you know, it's like I said at the beginning of the podcast. You've had a series of ups and downs in your life, like everyone has. And when I started this podcast, I used to think nobody's had as much shit go down in their life as I've had. And I've done over 150 interviews, and I can tell you a lot of people have, and some have had more. And it's not a competition. It's just what you do when those trials happen in your life and how you respond to those. But I wanted to go back to one thing, and there's like I said, I had about 8 or 10 of them. But one thing you said was when you went through that divorce, there was a period of time between the divorce and, of course, when you met Tina and she reached out. But you had made a decision that you wanted to improve, that you wanted to do better this next time. And it reminded me so much of myself because I got married at a very young age. I told you before we started the podcast, I grew up in a high demand religion. I didn't even tell you which one it was because it doesn't matter. My point is that in that religion, you didn't have sex unless you were married. That was a big thing. And so, you know, you might mess around a little bit, do this and that, but hey, you were saving yourself. So what happens? Well, people get married early. Because if you're in a relationship and you really care for this person, well, that's the next step. So bam, you're married. Well, what happens a lot of times is you're not really mature enough to be married, even though you're 21 or 22 or 18, like my wife was that I got married to. I mean, we'd known each other for 7 years. I knew her since she was 11 years old. But the thing is that we weren't emotionally mature enough to be married. So we got divorced. And it was a 2-year little marriage for myself. But man, I came out of that thing saying, I don't want to go through this again. And I took a class on relationships. That's how much it meant to me. I wanted to make sure that I was doing the best I could do to make sure that my relationship was going to be successful. So I could relate so much when you were saying that. So that was just one thing. But just the vision board, I'm a big believer in those things too. And you said I wrote in my journal. I've kept a journal my entire life. I just wrote in it last week. Now, I don't do it every day. I went through a period of about 7 years where I never missed a day. And then I started reading some of those. Man, they were boring. So, you just don't have enough stuff going on in your daily life to make it interesting. Because who's going to read this anyway after you're gone? Well, maybe nobody, but it's therapeutic for the individual to keep the journal too. So we have a lot of things in common there. And I do believe in journaling, and I do believe in having a vision and having goals. I wrote down 10 goals when I was 19 years old. Some of them are silly now when I look back. Never weigh over 199 pounds. Well, that was because my dad always was battling his weight and always on a diet. And I didn't want to go through that. So now I've taken 5 minutes and kind of rambled on there, but I just wanted you to know that I appreciate the story that you just told, because man, it will resonate with so many listeners, because we've all had those life experiences that have gotten us to where we are today. And if your friend Danny, hadn't challenged you, or maybe just, what about the radio thing? I thought you were going to do that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you'd have done it. Maybe you wouldn't have. But we need those people in our lives that kind of remind us of maybe something we said, or they know us sometimes better than we know ourselves, and we need to listen to them. And you've had a few key people like that in your life, between, like you say, your mom and your friend, and then of course Tina. And yeah, thank you for letting me at least kind of respond to some of those things you said, because they just meant a lot to me, and I know that they meant a lot to the listeners out there listening too.
Yeah. Oh, and fire away anytime you have a question. Seriously, I love sharing this, and I love when someone asks a question, because I've been on over 300 shows all around the world over the past 2 decades. I've had people ask me questions, and an answer came out of me that I had never even thought to share before. And one of those questions actually happened less than a year ago. It was before Tina had passed. So it was about a year ago. And I mentioned my friend Danny, and I mentioned my life coach, who had asked me, have you ever thought of being a motivational speaker or a stand-up comedian? His name was also Dan. And the host asked, do you have any idea what the guardian angel Daniel is all about? And I said, no. And we looked it up. Daniel is the patron saint of communication, artistry, the spoken word, singers, entertainers, people who are eloquent at getting a message across and impacting others with their message. Now, I had 2 friends who each encouraged me to put my best self out there, following a passion that I had had, both named Daniel. And when I shared that on that show, the host and I both, we held up our arms, just goosebumped up and down both arms. So we never know. And some people, of course, during the pandemic, they say, you have to pivot, you have to pivot. Well, that's an overused word. But I love to say, you know what? This person's question bounced me off the wall a different way, and something really beautiful came out of it. A realization for me that I now get to share with other people. So feel free to fire away with any questions at all. And I've got more dings, dents, and scars and stories from, like you said, up and down, and crashes and burns and burnout and frustration that have become what I thought was a low. It turned out that was just, if you remember in the movie Blazing Saddles from 1974,
Oh yeah,
great comedy movie. But near the beginning of it, 2 of the characters are stuck in quicksand, and they're sinking. But one of them just gets his toe on a train rail that's down there, and he gets to push up a little bit and gets them both out. All of those crashes and burns for me could have wiped me out. I mean, some of them seriously. I mean, I've jumped out of 3 perfectly good airplanes. I've crashed motocross racing. I crashed barefoot water skiing and thought I broke my back. Every single one of these was just, well, my toe landed on something solid and I came up and rose up out of the ashes like a phoenix, because somebody said that one time, Steve, you're like the mighty phoenix rising from the ashes. I'm like, yeah, hang on. My phoenix rides a pogo stick, up, down, and you burn your tail feathers off every time you crash and burn. But here's the beautiful part. Tail feathers grow back. And when they do grow back, they're brighter, they're stronger, and you can fly higher every time if you try to. Some people just love to sit in the ashes and complain about how hot it is and how much their life stinks. And how, see, I told you I shouldn't have even tried. Look, I failed at this.
Well, that's exactly what I was talking about when I said when these crash and burns or tragedies or downs or whatever you want to call them for a negative that's perceived negative, it's how you respond to that. And again, it's like, and I remember that movie very well. I've seen it 35 times. So I can pretty much, I know the 2 characters. I can see them with the little hand cart, and I can see the whole thing when you were saying that. So,
yep. And I just watched it the other day, which is why I thought to even say that in that moment, because of, again, something that you had said.
And you cannot make it today. You could not make that movie today.
Oh, no, you couldn't. I see a meme every once in a while on social media. Hey, Blazing Saddles is going to be shown on network TV tonight, edited. It'll be airing from 8 p.m. to 8:07, and I'm thinking, yeah, there might be a couple commercials in there too. So
that's exactly right. But yeah, so it's how you respond to the adversity that happens to all of us. And really that's what life becomes. I mean, are you somebody who, like you say, you just kind of, lives in the ashes, or are you somebody who rises up and decides, you know what? And so part of this came for me after leaving my high demand religion, because I had all the answers. The answers were all told to me, and so I didn't have to think about it, because I know what happens when we die. I know where I'll be if I live the right kind of life. And now I'm a free agent. I don't ascribe to any religion, and I try to be a good person. But I also think this could be our only life. I don't know. I hope there's something more. I lost a son. I've lost a brother. I've lost my parents. I've lost my in-laws. I hope I can see them again. And so that's what I say. I'm a hopeful agnostic. But it makes me appreciate every day. And moments like this where I'm talking with you, I've said it before on my podcast, I've never been to a therapist, but when I have these sit down talk story sessions, I feel like I'm getting therapy, because we're exchanging, and I'm hearing things that you say that make me reflect on things that have happened to me. And sometimes my guest will say something that's like, I want to do that. That's a good thing. I want to do that too. I want to experience that. So yeah, we learn from each other, and you learn a lot more listening than you do talking. And so as a talker, I have to remind myself of that. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy hearing others' stories. So I'm enjoying what you have to say, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. And you're right. I mean, sometimes out of the most just innocent conversations, a light just comes down and smacks you in the head, and you go, oh my gosh, it could really be that simple. I'd never been, therapy or anything in the past. Right now, I am speaking with somebody just to help me get through the grief and some of the drama going on behind the scenes.
Sure.
That very few people actually know about, but it's there. Somebody asked me, Steve, how are you getting through your grief? And I said, well, my family and I have a small nonprofit called BeachBum Philanthropy. Again, BeachBum, ocean. Because beach bums are very laid back people, and that's how I want to be about my entire life, and about giving. Just wherever you are, just look around and see an opportunity to give. So we have really stepped up the giving, and we try to do at least one act of kindness every day, myself, my family, and our team. But since losing Tina, even more important than ever is to honor her by continuing the giving that she did as part of Beach Bum. She was one of the founding members with us. And there's a local program called Friends Emergency Housing, and it's single parents with kids getting back on their feet. And they're in this program, and they work for up to a year. When they finally get their own apartment or their own place to call home, and they've put everything they have just into getting it, they literally have nothing. So in Tina's memory, we created a thing called Tina's Buckets of Love. We get a tall kitchen trash can, a laundry basket, and a mop bucket, and we fill it with almost $200 worth of kitchen utensils and cleaning supplies and personal care stuff. And we've been able to do that 5 times so far since Tina passed away. And the first one inspired a blog article called "Who Was That Tall Man Crying at the Dollar Tree?" It was me. I shopped for the first one, and I just stood there bawling my eyes out in the Dollar Tree, saying Tina would have loved this. And it's those moments. And some people will say, well, I don't have money to give, but someday when I'm retired, when I hit the lottery, when I do whatever, and I say, okay, here's an act of kindness you can do every day. Next time you go shopping, look for an abandoned shopping cart or somebody who's putting their last bags in their car, and maybe they've got kids already in the car and they don't want to walk far with the carriage. I said, either rescue one, and don't even get upset that someone left it there. Don't go off saying people are lazy. Just go rescue it. Or say, excuse me, would you like me to return that for you? Nobody's ever said no, and I've had some incredible conversations on some of my worst days. In kindness, in genuine giving kindness with the expectation of nothing in return, not even a thank you. I don't care if people thank me or not. You will find your best self in that. Because, and I believe this with my whole heart, sometimes the person who gets the most out of you committing an act of kindness is actually you.
Oh, yeah.
So I encourage people to do that. If you're feeling stuck or burned out, or if you're in the middle of the crash and burn and your tail feathers are gone and you're in the ashes, put your toe on the train rail of kindness and just pick yourself up a little bit. It's pretty addictive. It really is. We've gamified it.
Well,
who can look around and see who can create the most potential acts of kindness out of the situation and go. And then we just all scatter, and it's a blast.
Yeah. And I would say that I believe that you actually do get more than the person you're helping. I really feel that way, because the times that I do those things, and they could be small things, like you say, grabbing the shopping cart and taking it back, or holding a door open for somebody, or, you're stopped at a 4-way stop sign and you can just wave the other person on, or let them, hey, you go ahead.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much, but those things, we all benefit from that. And I've said this before, as I traveled the world, and we started doing a lot more traveling a few years ago, I see good people everywhere. If you watch the news at night, you would think the opposite. You would think that the world's going to shit and it's just, it's a terrible place. And that doesn't mean there aren't problems. I know there are, but I'm just telling you that people, the human beings on this planet, I believe 99% of them are really good people.
I got my old Ford 2-door pickup truck. I got her smelling like a rose and she's all gassed up. Got a shine on my scotch and my gem out with shades. Got my eyes on forever, cause forever starts today. I'm on the road to Hana, surfing through the radio. I'm on the road to Hana, best part is she don't know. Got a diamond in my pocket with her name written on it. I'm gonna get on my knees. I'm on the road to Hana, to say, Hana, will you marry me? I got 64.4 miles to go. I got my hand out the window, man, I'm taking it slow. Got an ocean to the left, wildflowers to the right. No, I never wear a watch, cause I'm always on island time. I'm on the road to Hana, surfing through the radio. I'm on the road to Hana, best part she don't know. Got a
I wanted to back up just a minute if you're comfortable. I didn't ask you this before, but can you talk a little bit about Tina and maybe what happened? And I know that she obviously affected your life in a very positive way. And I know I like talking about my son and talking about, so he wasn't perfect. We memorialize these people like they're saints or whatever, but my son was a good guy and taken early. And I can already tell that, Tina was a good person. And so if you don't mind just taking a few minutes and just maybe talking about Tina a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, Tina was and still is. I refer to her all the time on social media, and I just say this, said, I am missing my beautiful blue-eyed angel Tina every single day. We were instantly head over heels in love back in that summer of 2007 when we reconnected, to the point that I still have about 24 emails that we were sending. Of course, she was still living in Florida and I was in New Hampshire. I've got about 24 emails from those first couple of months with both of us saying, this is going to be our wedding. We're going to hold hands until we're 80 and we're going to be together forever. Now, I wish forever had lasted longer than her 56 years. But I'm very blessed that we got to be in love for 6,386 days, 17 and a half years. And from the very beginning, we just always picked each other up. And a big thing you hear about in relationships is, well, do you know someone's love language? Do you know your love language? And some people will say, well, I did this and I bought this and I took them here and this and that, and they're still not appreciative. Well, maybe their love language is just a simple holding hands, snuggling, cuddling, maybe a little note or a card now and then. Well, for Tina and I both, which is wonderful, it was the little moments of snuggling, cuddling, sitting next to each other on the couch. We would hold hands everywhere we went, even in our last day together. We were walking around holding hands. It's one thing to know someone's love language, but to be willing to speak it fluently every single day is something I encourage for people in their relationships. And the littlest gestures might mean an absolute ton to somebody. And this is why I'm so against the premise of the hustle and grind mindset. Going to grind and grind and grind and grind and grind. And when we retire, we're going to have this golden life together. No, man, it's day by day. And Tina and I had that. By the end of 2007, she knew, and her coworkers in Florida knew, because they have since sent me messages. When Tina came back from that weekend in New Hampshire in August of 2007, and we saw her happier than we'd ever seen her, oh, we knew she was gone. She was not going to be down here much longer. Word got around she wanted to be back in New Hampshire with me. Her company created a position for her in Burlington, Vermont, which is 2 hours and 18 minutes away from me. They created a position that didn't even exist so that she could be in one state away from me. And she was there for 4 years and then kind of was getting the bug that I really just want to be with Steve. Somebody from the corporate level of her company saw the amazing job she was doing, created a position for her at the corporate level that allowed her to work from home and maybe travel once or twice a month so that we could be together. And we've been together in New Hampshire ever since 2012. So we had all these things. And every time an opportunity came up, she would go, is this that law of attraction thing you talk about? I go, yes, baby. That is exactly it. You say what you want, you do your best, you put it out there, and you see opportunities. It doesn't mean you magically get it. But when we finally got to be together, that's when it just was just incredible. And that lasted up until, early December of last year. And we'd gone on a Mediterranean cruise in June of 2024. And I had on my vision board, I had a cruise. I put it on there the year before and all the names of the European countries. And one day she came up to me and said, I think I want to go on a Mediterranean cruise. I'm like, have you seen my vision board? She goes, no, why? I'm like, it's on there. We just had that amazing energy with each other too. We could anticipate each other's thoughts. So we did that. And then in late July, early August of last year, Tina said, "Hun, I know where our next vacation is going to be." And I thought, great, where? She goes, England. I want to go to London. I said, awesome. When do you want to go? She said, second week of December. And I'm thinking, it's cold there. Why do you want to go then? And she tilted her head and rolled her eyes a little, her beautiful blue eyes. And she goes, well, there's a tribute to George Michael concert. Now, George Michael was Tina's favorite singer. She was just in love with his music and his story. And she said, with the blessing of his estate, which is extremely rare, his former touring musicians and backup singers are putting on a series of concerts to honor him. And I bought us tickets. So the trip was already booked. I didn't know. We left Boston late on Friday night, December 7th. We arrived, on Saturday night. We arrived there Sunday morning, December 8th. Had a pretty laid-back day, just did a little walking around, mostly rested. That night, we sat in the hotel bar. Tina wanted to go down for a drink. I just ordered a cranberry and soda because I haven't had alcohol since May of 2021. And Tina said, when he pushed my drink to me, she goes, oh, babe, don't drink that. I think he put vodka in it. I thought, wow, okay. So it turns out he did. He misunderstood our order. And I went to slide it back to him. She goes, hang on. And she grabs it and she puts it next to her drink. She goes, I'll drink the mistake. I have no problem with that. And then she went to grab her drink. And for some reason, I grabbed my phone and took a picture of her fingertips holding the top of her glass. That was the last photo ever taken of Tina. We had an incredibly deep, open, loving, hand-holding, vulnerable conversation that night. Both of us with kind of some self-doubt and feeling as though all of this was just lucky. And she even admitted that. She said, I just feel like I've been lucky. My job and us and this trip and all this and that. And I said, babe, do you realize that none of this would have happened if you were not brave enough on June 16th, 2007 to reach out to a guy after 21 years and be vulnerable enough to say, I like you. I said, none of this would have happened if you hadn't done that. So please don't think you're lucky. You made this happen and we do the work every day. And 12 hours later, we went to breakfast, went back up to our room. She said, oh, babe, can you get my laptop? I got to just check in with work and do a couple things. I said, sure, I'll go downstairs to the gym. And I did. Just before I came up from the gym, I took a selfie in the gym, and I just wanted to have the most determined stare on my face, because that was going to be the picture I was going to put on my vision board for 2025 of just this determination to put my business back where I needed it to be. And I went back upstairs, and she was leaning back and a little slumped over on the couch. And at first I thought she was sleeping because she'd been dealing with menopause for almost 2 years, and it really racked her. It hit her very, very hard. She had a lot of issues. And then I looked and I realized that she was out. And I think I dove over the coffee table, hit the couch, touched her face, and jumped to the phone and called down to the front desk. And 2 staff members came running up, a young man and a young lady. He was on the phone with the hospital trying to get the EMTs, and she realized Tina still had a pulse. So he pulled her down to the floor and were trying to resuscitate her, and essentially Tina died right there in my arms while I was talking with her. The EMT showed up. They tried for an hour, but they never got her back. And that was, 3,000 miles from home, physically shaking, emotionally shattered, and all alone. And thank God, the day before, we were outside on the sidewalk, outside the hotel, and I looked across the street up at this building and I started laughing. And Tina said, what are you laughing at? And I said, that looks like Nakatomi Plaza from the movie Die Hard, the Bruce Willis movie, which is a Christmas movie, by the way. People debate that. And I said, it ain't Christmas till you see Hans Gruber fall off Nakatomi Plaza. And I didn't have my phone. I used hers. When we got back to our room, I said, oh, babe, what's the password for your phone? In 17 and a half years, I'd never asked her the password for her phone. The next day after she passed, I knew the password to her phone because everything was in her phone. our hotel reservation, our flights home, the limousine picking us up in Boston, the travel insurance policy that she had taken out that I wasn't even aware of, her family's phone numbers, everything was in that phone. She was already being my angel looking out for me because I asked her the day before for her password.
Yeah, that's tough stuff, man. I mean, I guess back to what I said, you try to get the most out of each day because you just never know in this life. And clearly there's a difference too. And you know this, Steve, if somebody's had cancer like Danny and he beat it a couple of times, but it came back and you kind of knew that things were progressing and because I had a brother that passed that way from cancer at the age of 28.
Oh, wow.
But my son, he had a ruptured iliac artery and I wasn't even in the same state. I mean, within an hour he was gone. And so wow. I know what that's like. I mean, you went down to the gym, you come up and she's out, like you said. And so there's different kinds of death experiences, I guess is a way of saying it. And I'm not sure one's better than another, but they're tough. They're very tough. And I can only imagine, what you went through at that time. Like you say, 3,000 miles from home, just having to navigate that whole experience and what that would entail. But yeah, how fortunate to get, like you say, for Tina to give you that password just the day before.
Oh, 100%. And it unlocked everything. And all of the people, the general manager of the hotel staff could not have been nicer. I was stuck there in England for 2.5 weeks. I was alone the first 5 days. My sister flew over. She lives in Texas. She dropped everything. Her company allowed her to work remotely. And she flew over there after 5 days just to be there to support me. And wound up staying with me for a month, even back here at our house when we finally got back. I mean, she and I caught the second to last flight out of England before Christmas. It was on the 24th of December that we got out of there. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we got home, Tina was my angel again because my best friend of 40 plus years came down to Logan Airport in Boston to pick us up, brought us to our house. Now, nobody had a key to our house. Nobody. So it sat for 2.5 weeks. All I had was a garage door opener. I didn't even have a key. And I opened the garage door, went into the basement, and I went, it smells like propane. And I thought, well, the house has been sitting for a couple of weeks. Went upstairs to the kitchen, brought all our stuff up, and it smelled even stronger. It smelled like a combination of rotten food and propane. And I thought, well, maybe we left some food in the garbage thinking we're only going to be gone 5 days, and it was 2.5 weeks. And my neighbor came over with all the packages that had been delivered. And I looked at one, it was from one of my coaching clients. And I opened it up and it was a grief candle. And I thought, well, just to get rid of the rotten food smell, I should light this. And for some reason I didn't. 20 minutes later, I realized one of us had bumped the stove on our way out of the house to go to London. And one of the burners, gas, was open. Not all the way. It had been leaking propane and filling our house for 2.5 weeks full of propane gas. I would have blown that house right off the foundation. I would have shown up at the pearly gates, right behind Tina, and she said, "Babe, what are you doing here? And where the hell are your eyebrows?" I blew up the house. So she intervened. I did not light that candle, despite the fact that we had a lighter right there in the kitchen drawer because we burn candles now and then. Mm-hmm. And she saved my butt and has ever since. We had a lightning strike 2 weeks ago. I was up on the front steps and even in the video, I said, if Tina was here right now, she'd be telling me, get your butt in the house. You're leaning against a wrought iron railing in this thunder and lightning. 10 minutes later, I'm sitting on the back porch, 3-season porch. And I looked up at the woods behind our house just in time to see the lightning hit the ground about 40 feet from the house. And all I could think of was her laughing, saying, "Told you to stay in the house."
There's a podcast, and it deals with people who have passed away. The guy who hosts it, his father died in one of the towers of 9/11. and he hosts a podcast, and it's very interesting. And a lot of them are people who have had NDEs, a near-death experience, and they'll talk about it. And they'll talk about sometimes how they have been able to hear their loved one who's passed away, or they've seen them in a vision, or they've come to them in a dream or something. And every time I hear that, I think I'd like to have that experience from my son, because I've had nothing. And so to have, like you say, just these little things like that. I mean, we say little, but they could have ended your life if you hadn't paid attention or hadn't done them or whatever. Yeah, those are great things. I mean, and to have somebody there that you feel like is still around you. And remember how you started off early on? You were talking about how you got in the shower and you put your Sirius radio on, and you've had Elton John and George Michael this week or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that. And so, yeah, I every once in a while I'll have something like that where, of course, and I got a tattoo of my son's name right here. I mean, Dusty, a month after he passed. And I think about him every day because I put it there for that reason, and also for the reason of people saying, "Oh, what's your tattoo?" And then when they ask me, I get a chance to talk about my son a little bit. And so I like doing that. And I'm sure for you, I'm not going to say it's fun, but I think it's a way to remember in a positive way Tina as we talk about her. And as we talk about some of the memories that you've had and some of the experiences you guys shared together. And I really liked what you had to say about the little things, about the cuddling and the holding hands, and it doesn't have to be big things. And I think that that's one message or a takeaway I've gotten from what you've had to say there. It doesn't have to be the big events. Those things are nice or whatever, but it can be just the little things, a note that somebody leaves. I was looking through one of my journals. I think I mentioned this to you either in the podcast or before we started, that I had recently updated my journal. And of course, you go down that rabbit hole, you start reading some of the stuff, and then an hour later, you're still reading it. But I saw a little note that I had kept, and I took Scotch tape and put it in my journal from when I was dating my wife. And she'd left it on the back of my motorcycle. She'd driven down the road and saw my motorcycle and put a little note on it. And I have it in my journal to this day. And that was, that was over 45 years ago. But it's the little things like that I think mean a lot. Yeah, I'm with you there. I agree with that.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I mean, I love that she left that note and that you kept it. Because when I finally got home from England and we're starting to go through everything, going through Tina's desk, I found a couple of folders. She had kept every card and every letter and every note I'd ever given to her. She had them all. And I took 41. We had 3 or 4 multicolored sticky note pads in our kitchen drawer. And my day would start before hers. So while she was still upstairs getting ready for work, for her to go to her office on the first floor, I would leave a note tucked in her laptop or on her desk, a sticky note. She had kept between 50 and 60 of them. And I found this big picture frame in our basement that wasn't being used for anything. I made a collage out of 41 of them, and that's now hanging on the wall in her office, right next to our Peloton cycle, which I ride every morning, Monday through Friday. And that collage is right there. And there's so many different ones, and I remember a lot of them. And some of them are silly and funny, but I was so blown away that she kept them all, that I made this collage. And it just brings me joy every day because I remember, it wasn't just love you, love you, love you. It was whatever weird thing was going on that day. And Edwin McCain was another singer that Tina loved, and she'd seen him a bunch of times. And during the pandemic, he would do these little concerts on Facebook Live from his basement because he couldn't tour anywhere. And he did them as fundraisers. So Tina would send him, a donation, and he'd be singing and talking and joking. And we slow danced to one of his songs one night. And the next morning I wrote a note and I said, Edwin McCain was right. I could not ask for more, which is the name of one of his most famous songs. And so that's in the collage. And I thought a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to take a picture of that note and I'm going to send it to Edwin McCain and just let him know that one of his, a fan of his music who loved it so much and was such an important part of our marriage, our relationship. And he gave it the heart emoji, and he appreciated that that was there. So all those little things that people think aren't big things, they are.
Yeah. And I do it with pictures. And when my son passed away, I went through all of our photos, and I've kind of got this rep for being the guy taking pictures. So if we go on a trip with, 8 or 10 of us, which we do a couple times a year now, we take these cruises wherever in the world, I'm the picture guy. But I was able to take about 970 pictures and make them into a photo book. And then I gave one to my son's siblings and a couple of other friends and family. And I'm telling you, the only thing I wish is that I took more, because when someone's gone, all you have left are, like you say, the sticky notes or the photos. You took that last picture of her, fingers on the glass.
Yeah.
That's all you have left, though, and some memories. But the pictures help rekindle the memories. And that's what I love about pictures. I can look at a picture and bam, it's just like a song sometimes. You hear a song, it takes you right back to the moment. And so, yeah, I'm so glad for the things I have, and I'm sure you are too. There's no doubt. I mean, just taking those sticky notes and put them into that picture frame. You look at it all the time, and every time you do, you think about her, and you think about some of the things, and the fact that she kept them, which just means a lot. So,
yeah.
Very
Speaking the love language fluently, that's the key every single day, even in the tiniest of ways. And that's what we did for 17 and a half years.
well, all I can say is I'm glad you had the 17 and a half years. I mean, you just never know in this life. You just don't. My son got married a year before he passed, and it was super hard on his wife when he passed because it was so unexpected. And they'd just been married almost a year and a half, I guess. But you had 17 and a half. And I think that's what I think back on when I hear about a tragedy, because these are tragedies, is that, well, hey, at least you had that. I mean, it, could have been this or whatever, but it's just how, I mean, it's just life. And I don't know how else to say it except to, if for the listeners that are hearing this, just appreciate your loved ones and do those little things like Steve mentioned. It's just the little things that I think, mean the most, and create memories, man, because, sometime, that person may not be around anymore. It could be 10 years from now, or it could be tomorrow. We don't know, but just let them know that you love them and appreciate them, and, speak that love language, like you're saying, Steve.
Yeah, 100%. And the most impactful message I heard, and there were a lot of people that just said, it's amazing, you get to be together 6,386 days. And I got a DM from a gentleman shortly after I got back to America. And I put on social media, I said 6,386 days. And I talked about the greatest things about being in love with Tina. And he said, Steve, I'm so sorry that you lost your Tina, because I always called her my Tina. Every time I said it, it was my Tina. And he said, I just wanted to send you a message to let you know that I've never had one day feeling the type of love that you felt for 6,386 days. So I just want to let you know how inspiring your story is. As sad as it is right now, I just wanted to let you know that it inspires me. And I thought, wow, not one day. And I got that many. Very blessed.
Yeah. Very, very, very inspiring story. And I'm glad you took the time and told us a little bit more about Tina, because I could certainly see the impact that she has had on your life and still has on your life. And hey, if people want to reach out to you, Steve, how can they do that?
Yeah, the easiest places, I am on mainly with social media, Facebook and LinkedIn. If you look up Steve Gamlin, Gamlin, and online, my website, we've got a brand new one coming, but it's currently stevegamlinspeaker.com.
All right, great. And I'll try to put those in the show notes too. I say that sometimes and I get forgetful because I'm old, but I'll make myself a note. That's one of my life hacks, is leave a lot of notes for myself so I don't forget things. But
Well, I'm not that far behind. I'm 57, so.
hey, so Beach Bum, right? So, when you say that, of course, I think of Jimmy Buffett, because he's been such a big influence in my life, and I've seen him in concert 13 times before he passed. But I was going to say, is that it? Are you a Buffett or a Parrot head at all, or a Buffett fan?
I'm a casual fan. Tina was a big fan. She saw him a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Over the years. But it was the laid back vibe about it. And that's what I love the most.
Yep.
About Buffett, and about kindness and giving and being just being a beach bum. You're just going with the flow of the waves, and that's how I treat my entire life.
Yeah, and I got to say, I didn't really mention it, but I think that that's very admirable of what you're doing and the whole, trying to help others. And like you say, 5 times now you've been able to put that little gifts together for somebody that needs those things. And that was the thing I heard when you were talking about as you were filling them with laundry detergent or whatever it was. Those are needs. We all have wants, but before we get there, we have the needs that have to be taken care of. So it's really cool that you guys are doing that. Commend you for that.
We work with about a half a dozen local nonprofits, and my favorite calls to make are, "Hey, it's Steve from the Beach Bums. Steve, what do you need this week?"
Yeah. Very cool.
And it's just a blast. And for us to be trusted enough, we even cook food for some of these shelters, to be trusted enough is such a blessing.
When we moved here in 2018, right away within the first couple of months, we met this gal named Carol Hollowell and has become very good friends, her and her husband, Bob. She is a CEO of a nonprofit called Switch Point. And basically, if you think of a switch point on a train track, you pull that thing and the train goes down a different path. And so that's where that term came from. And they have just since we've known her, and it had been around for a couple of years before we got here in 2018, but they have a shelter for people that a lot of times it might be women and kids who are on their own and they can stay there. And they have cafeteria now. They have created what I would call, low-income housing. She's great at writing grants. And so that's her real talent, she would tell you, is that she's just good at writing the grants and then relies on people for then coming and helping. And so we do fundraisers and things. But now they have Switch Point shelters in, I'd say about 5 different cities in Utah now. It started here in St. George, but they're up in Tooele and they're in Salt Lake City, and they have taken over old hotels and refurbished them and now have them for seniors living there. And so it's just kind of, and she would tell you she's a humanist. And that's how I'm trying to emulate that a little bit and try to be more of a humanist and just try to help out and give of money if you can, but also give of your time and do that kind of thing. And so what she's doing has inspired a lot of other people too. And I think that's the thing. If you think about Tina and you putting together that Beach Bum Foundation, you're helping others. And yeah, you get a lot from it for doing it. Like I said earlier, I think sometimes maybe even more than the people you're helping, but you're helping a lot of people that are maybe down on their luck or just haven't had the breaks that other people have had. That's what we need to do. And I go back to what I said, 99% I believe of the people in the world are good people. And sometimes they just need direction in. They don't know where to give. They don't know. And so by you having that foundation, by Carol having Switch Point, it gives other people a chance to then pitch in and help out, which just makes everybody feel good.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. And my number one thing every day, I just want to leave a trail of plus signs behind me wherever I go. And that's personally or professionally. Even if I'm just going to the grocery store, I just try to make somebody laugh. I made a woman laugh the other day in the aisle. She was, I'm 6'2". She was not anywhere near 6'2". She was looking at the top shelf, and I said, "Excuse me, but is there something up there I could reach for you?" And she goes, "Oh, no, I'm just wondering why the bags are smaller and the price is higher than they used to be." And we started laughing, and I said, "No problem, but if you see something while I'm still here, happy to do it." And she said, "You're lucky you're tall." I said, "You want to feel the top of my head and feel all the dents?" I go, "I banged this coconut off a whole bunch of things." And she just started laughing. We never met each other, but I don't know how her day was. And my day was kind of frustrating, which is why I got out of the house and went and did groceries. I walked out of there happier.
Yeah.
So I just want to leave plus signs wherever I go. And the best part about it is I own the factory. I will never, ever, ever run out.
And that interaction impacted you because here you are repeating it to me now. So that's what I mean. We benefit from these interactions too and doing those things. So yeah, I totally get it. And I appreciate you being on here, Steve, and sharing your story and your personality because, you're a good person, a good spirit, and I can feel that. I can see that. And I know the listeners can too. So yeah, just keep leaving plus signs, man.
I'm honored. Thank you very much. I have totally enjoyed this. And thank you so much for inviting me to share my story and have this conversation.
Appreciate it, Steve. Hey, listeners, check back again as we will have another fun and interesting story, and very impactful too. And Steve said a lot of things today that I know I'm going to remember and I'm going to think about, and I'm sure you listeners will as well. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha, everyone.
Down a little country road not far away. Let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love not long ago.
Let's talk story. Let's talk story. Let's talk story.
Sit down and relax, stay a little while. It's been so long since I've seen your smile. Well, a little of this and a little of that.